Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, do you feel safer after the state has reported that youth crime has declined? School board embroiled in sexual harassment controversy. Sports betting comes to Pike and Rose. And have we already forgotten the devastating losses of the 9/11 attacks? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by Laurie Halverson, president of the Montgomery County Federation of Republican Women, and Democratic civic activist Cary Lamari. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. In a controversial report issued by the Maryland State Department of Juvenile Services titled Putting Youth Crime in Maryland in Context, a study of youth crime trends over the past 10 years, it concluded that crimes committed by young people is part of a roughly decade-long overall decline. Cary, welcome back to the program. One should be happy that youth crime has declined, but the Department of Juvenile Services is being accused of cherry-picking the results by downplaying increased crimes related to handguns and carjackings while emphasizing that other crimes like robberies had decreased. What do you make of this report?
Well, from a substantive standpoint, the report was lacking. I mean, that's all I can say about it. It did talk about youth crimes, but then it kind of compartmentalized it. You know, robberies, carjacking, homicides. It said generally crime has gone down. However, you know, the real crimes like carjackings up 77%, homicides are up like 270%. I don't see the benefit of the document. Furthermore, it talked about knowing who the victims are, but not who the perpetrators are, because they don't keep track of that. The end result, the final conclusion is the same conclusion that everyone's had for years and years and years. We're deficient in our ability to create opportunities for our residents in this county and our state. You know, youth recreation facilities, vocational training, education, jobs. I mean, how many times on this show have we said this council is not focusing on the job outlook? You know, you want to reduce crime? You got to create a better quality of life for people. You got to educate these young people and give them opportunities.
Well, I want to go to Laurie, because what Cary has brought up brings up a wonderful statistic out of the report, and it says that much of the increases in juvenile crime has occurred among people of color, and seemed to increase dramatically during the pandemic shutdown. But is the state doing enough to reach potential young offenders before they engage in criminal behavior? 9 out of 10 people incarcerated in Maryland are there for crimes they committed before the age of 18. So what are we doing to address the root causes that leads these people to crime?
Yeah, I also thought an alarming statistic was that Maryland is 1 out of 4 states with 6% or more youth incarcerated since they were, in childhood. So that is very concerning that we really are at the bottom of all the states. And the state is doing a little, but the focus is on those who are already committing crimes. We need to really go after, get kids before they commit their first crime. That's what we need to do. They have a Safe Summer program and a Thrive Academy program. Those are some small things that can probably help some, but we really need to reach out to children before they commit crimes. We could do year-round school in Baltimore, since Baltimore is one of the worst by far of all of the areas in the state. Baltimore has the worst crime statistics for youth. Plus, there's so many youth getting killed in Baltimore. It's a crisis, and we really should be trying to keep our kids in a safe place. And one of those safest places would be in our schools. So year-round school would be a good option. More parental programs and activities for parents and families would be good. with flexible schedules, because we know that families are busy and parents work at all hours. A program that I participated in when I was younger was called Safety Town in North Canton, Ohio. My dad was in the JCs. It was a community program that the JCs organized where kindergartners and first graders were taught about safety rules, about pedestrian safety. They met policemen and firemen and got to see the fire engines. They
It's
got
a different day, Laurie.
It was, I know, but that taught them at such a young age not to talk to strangers.
It's a different world today.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
but it's a program I think that should be reinstated.
Just barely scratches the surface of what needs to be done. Cary, I'll give you the last word on this.
I mean, there's not much more to say. The reality is we are not doing enough to help families. You know, whether your kids, young, old, doesn't really matter. If we're not creating the opportunities for these people, you're leaving them on their own. The council members are still going to get
there has to be an effort, and I hope Governor Moore does more than just talk. He actually put some programs in place to address this serious issue because it affects us all. Now let's go on to our more I guess dramatic topic, which is Montgomery County Board of Education has been embroiled in the middle of allegations that MCPS ignored allegations of sexual harassment complaints prior to promoting Joel Beidleman, to principal of Paint Branch High School. Cary, this is a pretty big issue. What can you tell us about this?
Oh, I love the word I use for Montgomery County, and I love Montgomery County, but the word is dysfunction. The reality is here, their policy. First of all, they hire an attorney to review and provide input on what went wrong, and then the attorney comes back and says, "Well, it's practice and policy that we don't really inform the school board or the superintendent of schools or administration when we have an anonymous complaint or an informal complaint." And he had a report. They have a form called 39-230 or something. I can't remember. But unless a teacher files that report out using the right document, right? They don't review it. And guess what? The Good Old Boy Network, the politically astute semi-politician who's a principal, they get rewarded. They move up the ladder, whether you're a coach, whatever. The schools don't look at the negative actions. They only look at, what they've done for them lately. We've got a real problem.
I'm kind of surprised that there's not greater enforcement or attention paid to complaints, that came out. But Laurie, the law firm of Jackson Lewis, whom Cary mentioned, was hired to investigate the school board and on this matter, as it was reported earlier this week. And according to the public summary, Beidleman was promoted even though there were allegations of harassment, that MCPS failed to take appropriate action, but it exonerated the school board from any malfeasance or negligence. So is this the end of the matter? Is this kind of just going to be whitewashed over the decks and forgotten?
I hope not, but it is a pattern that we've seen over the years. We've seen time after time after time sexual harassment issues from teachers, from administrators that have just been swept under the rug. Even though it gets public attention for a little while, it sort of wanes. It was a problem when I was a PTA leader. I remember having, there was a principal who was really should not have been a principal in the classroom for many reasons. And when she finally got pushed out of the school over a number of years, she got promoted to headquarters. And I learned at the time that there were no exit interviews that were given by all the teachers that had left the school. There were a lot of teachers leaving the school because of that principal. And nobody was asking the teachers, why are you leaving? And they weren't saying, oh, the principal's just doing a horrible job or whatever. So if you could just do do exit interviews of the teachers and make sure there's no retribution if they say something negative. That's another thing, because I think teachers are afraid to speak up. But exit interviews and sharing those interviews with anyone hiring throughout the system needs to be transparent, so that when those people are hiring someone, they know what they're getting. They often don't know what they're getting, and often headquarters may not know what they're getting. They just think, oh, this is someone who's moving up from, it's but I think there is a general understanding that that's what happens to a lot of people. They get moved up when they're not working out in the classroom or in the administrative position.
Well, what we need is greater accountability, and we have an inspector general for the county government. Why aren't these matters being investigated by the inspector general?
Cary. I have to interrupt here. I mean, it's a culture of how we do things in Montgomery County. You have to go along to get along. Teachers
that's a good point.
They're afraid to file a formal complaint. So they do go the informal route or anonymous route. And then that gives the school board and the superintendent the veil of cover, saying, okay, I don't have to even look at the complaint because it's anonymous, right? Let's reward this guy because he's politically astute. He's a good old, go along to get along kind of guy. This is not how we do government. But it seems like that's how we're doing. We did it with the planning board, and we always forgive them afterwards. Yeah. It's got to end. This culture of closing a blind eye unless they go along to get along, and I get to look good and get a bigger paycheck. I'm sorry. Our kids deserve better. Our families deserve better.
Well, and let's remember, we've been run by Democrats for many years now. Maybe it's time for people to start electing some Republicans.
One party rule is never good, regardless of.
It happened though prior to
the party is.
Let's not go there.
You need somebody to act as a counterbalance, and unfortunately, with the lack of news outlets, it's harder and harder to have independent investigations. That's why we need great programs like here on Montgomery Community Media, like 21 this week. We got it. When we come back from this short break, sports betting comes to North Bethesda. And have we forgotten the pain of 9/11? Stay tuned. And welcome back. Regular viewers of this program know that I've never been a supporter of legalized gambling. I mean, I think it's just a dumb way for government to fund itself. But that position now seems like closing the barn door after the horse has been stolen. There's gambling everywhere. There's a lottery, there are gambling casinos. And now we have online sports betting. And guess what? Nonetheless, over the past decade, legalized gambling has exploded across the country as money-hungry states have become addicted to the easy allure of revenue from gambling. Laurie, the latest innovation is part of the state's blueprint for Maryland's future, because we gotta make sure we protect the schools. The opening of a sports book in North Bethesda at Sports and Social Restaurant in North Bethesda. Is this a good thing? Can we keep going down this path?
Well, it's already happened, and unfortunately, we're seeing gambling addiction increasing in our state, and we always seem to pass these types of things under the guise of helping education in our state, when that's not really what it's all about. It makes the pie bigger for the state, but it doesn't make the piece of the pie of education any much larger, maybe a tiny bit larger, but it's not really that's just a way to get in and get this passed. If everyone knew that this was not going to be for education, I don't think it would have passed in the first place. And I don't see how adding marijuana legalization, how gambling, and who knows if we're going to be next adding prostitution to our state to add more money to the pot. And casinos, I've walked through them. They are depressing to me. And another thing to really be concerned about is when you add more gambling, you add more human trafficking. Human trafficking is a problem in our state, in our county. I just heard a presentation about it at MCGOP headquarters this week. And when you add more things like that, you're going to have more children who are going to be exploited. And that's something we need to think about.
Well, I know our positions is akin to the crotchety old man saying, "Get off my lawn." And so should we just ignore all that social ills from gambling addiction and be glad the state isn't raising our taxes? Cary.
You know, the reality is the vast majority of people can go to a social atmosphere, and they can gamble and they can drink and eat dinner, and they're not going to get affected. But we just talked about youth crimes. We talked about, crime in general. There's a segment of the population that are addictive to a lot of things, and you put them in a situation where they can gamble. I mean, I knew a lot of kids growing up when I went to high school, and a lot of them used to go to the horse races. I mean, they just gambled.
Well, I guess we have to put in perspective. I mean, the perspective is you can now gamble on your handheld device, and I mean, so it's not just physically going to Rosecroft Raceway or going to Las Vegas or Atlantic City. I mean, it's right there in front of us all the time. So I guess we can't ignore that reality.
You also have to be
cognizant of it.
You have to be proactive and find, if you're going to have that reality, then you have to have programs that help people that have these addictions. I mean, if you go to a bar and somebody's drinking too much, isn't the bar also responsible if they watch it? Well, I mean, gambling's the same way. If they're going in there and gambling day in, day out, and you see a problem, then that facility owes a responsibility, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We got to end this segment, but obviously nothing against sports and social restaurant, and this is a legal activity, but I just wish we weren't so dependent on these forms of revenue to support our programs. Now our last topic, and this is one that's always a little somber for me. It's been 22 years since the events of September 11th, 2001, which brought the nation to a halt and changed our foreign policy forever. This week, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre suggested that it may be time to rethink how the nation remembers 9/11 when, in defense of President Biden not attending the official 9/11 commemorative events, she said, "The analogy that I was given is that 22 years after Pearl Harbor, U.S. presidents were still not going to Hawaii." Whether that's a true fact or not, I don't believe it is. Cary, I lost 3 friends that day who were on American Airlines Flight 77, and it's with me forever. That flight crashed into the Pentagon, and for me personally, it's very difficult to remove my sentiments when discussing this issue. But has Jean-Pierre brought up a legitimate issue? Is it time to move on from 9/11?
No, he hasn't. I mean, World War II is a perfect example of that. Never forget. Never allow it to reoccur. Be prepared for the next time it happens and how it's going to happen the next time. Patriotism is not partisan, okay? And it shouldn't be partisan. The reality is we need to remember, and we need to memorialize these events so that we don't forget and we don't allow it to reoccur. That's my opinion.
Laurie, the city of Rockville should be commended for continuing to honor the 11 Montgomery County residents who were victims that day. Your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I agree. I think as long as there's public sentiment on the 9/11 attacks, we should be doing something to honor all the people who died and the families who have had to live through this. As long as people are alive who have relatives who and friends who died, we should be remembering this and beyond, but maybe anniversaries every 10 years or so after, 50 years from now or so, maybe. But and I think, the whole thing about Biden not really being at one of these places, at one of the locations of the 9/11 attack, he had just been to Vietnam, And I think, he's medically, he probably couldn't handle going to some place like that. He did show up in Alaska and make a statement, but I think, because of his medical issues, they're not telling us, but I think that he just wasn't capable of being in a public place like that with his dementia. So and Kareem is just giving excuses.
Well, I personally, I think it was poor staff work on the part of the White House not to have scheduled the Vietnam trip in a way that would have still allowed him to return to the United States with sufficient time
Yeah,
to
that's true.
participate. I was very sorry that it was done that way, but I was also heartened by the fact that so many people reacted in a way that says this is still an important issue for them, that they still remember. They still remember the lives that died in Sparksville, Pennsylvania. They still remember the people who died in Manhattan, and they still remember the people who died at the Pentagon. And I think that's a good thing for all of us, because it's so important that we shouldn't forget, not just because of the loss of our loved ones, but because of the implications it has for the greater political nature and society of the United States. So with that, I think we should end the subject and go on and wait for parting shots. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Laurie Halverson.
Yes, we were talking about memorials earlier, and it's also appropriate today to mention that on September 16th, 2013, 12 people were shot at the Navy Yard, and it's the 10th anniversary since that horrible incident occurred. So I just want to remember all the families affected and all the people who died on that horrible day.
Thank you, Laurie. Cary Lamari, your parting shot.
Okay. Hate to go back to the schools, but I have to. I mean, this past year, we had a tax increase of 4.7%. Many advocates of the schools wanted a 10% increase. 27% proficiency in math, 45% proficiency in reading, fentanyl and drug problems within our schools, truancy, sexual harassment, and now we find we have a dysfunctional system. They're talking about a 7% increase in taxes next year, property taxes. Do we continue to reward for dysfunction, or do we put them on notice here and now that we're not going to accept it? And I'll leave it to you. You guys have to decide. That's my point.
Well, thank you, Cary. Actually, commentator Adam Pugnuko has written a series about the upcoming battle for the Board of Education in Montgomery County. It's a 5-part series, and for anybody who's a political junkie like we are, it's must reading to understand the different pressures that are going to come to bear during the next election cycle. So I recommend that everyone read Montgomery Perspectives, that is the name of Adam's website, and read those wonderful articles. That it captures the national nature of the debate, as well as the local nature of the debate, and how it's going to impact Montgomery County. And this is a topic I've been beating to death over the last several weeks on the show. So I know everybody's going to want to be more attuned to that. And finally, one of the topics that ended up on the cutting room floor was the Gaithersburg Gazette article about pizza in Montgomery County and all of the wonderful places that were identified. Unfortunately, I haven't been to any of them. My tastes are so pedestrian. I like Pizza Hut still. So anyway, grab the Gazette, read that article, and it's a fun read. So I want to thank Laurie for being here. I want to thank Cary. It's good to see you, my man. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.